and give them a minute to get in and we'll get started. And I'm going to share my screen.
Recording in progress.
Boy, that's some kind of reverb there. All right, everyone. I want to welcome you to our 25 Maintenance Roundtable. My name is Dan Hendy. I am the director of the Maintenance Institute, and I'm here to welcome you to our roundtable today. It is called Spring Turf Management and Concerns with Jeff Fowler and Matt Duncan. They're here today as our moderators, experts, whatever you want to call them. They're here to help us all manage our turf for the spring and beyond. Because as they've been informing me, this is also a critical time to start managing your turf with the eye towards the fall square sports or rectangle sports, as you call them. So I'm anxious to get started. Before we do get started, just a couple of things to share here. One, some Zoom tips for you. If you haven't heard these already, you must not have been on Zoom in about 4 years. But anyway, just to review, this is a Zoom meeting. Everyone, you'll be able to unmute yourself to ask questions and actively participate. However, when you are not speaking, please mute yourself, as this will minimize any kind of background noise, sirens, dogs, things like that. And I'll be here as your sort of moderator, and you can always use the chat box, and I'll make sure that your questions get answered. And as you already heard from that voice, this session is being recorded and will be posted on the Maintenance Institute website for people who want to review or see the recording themselves. As always, these chats go better when everybody's on the screen and participating. But some of you were kind enough to give me questions going forward for Jeff and Matt. So I'm going to act as sort of your moderator. And go ahead, let me end my share here. And go ahead and start with some of the questions from you guys when you registered for this session. So looking through these questions, I do get one of the things I think would be important is okay, now that winter, we've had these blessed few warm days here in Pennsylvania anyway, and things are wet, but the sun is out, it's 60 degrees. There's probably a lot of winter damage to fields. One gentleman someone just texted in, they're managing turf that has been driven over on freezing conditions, and now it's yellow. How do you fix that stuff? How do you fix those big indents in your turf from previous use in the winter or something like that?
Matt, go ahead.
Well, I'm kind of experiencing the same thing now. My son's the head groundskeeper for the Mahoning Valley Scrappers in Northeast Ohio in Youngstown. And Youngstown State University is starting. They were out here yesterday, and as of Sunday, the field was still frozen. So we're experiencing that here. Really what we're trying to do is keep them off. But yeah, they've walked on it when it was frozen, and we have some yellow footprints and things like that. Basically, it's in a matter of time. Things, obviously, soil temperatures have to warm up first to try to get those areas to recover. And as soon as you can fertilize, even with some ammonium sulfate, just to try to get things to start to green up while soil temperatures are still cold, would definitely help. But yeah, I think really just it's going to take time to get those areas to recover. We're still, even though the daytime temperatures are in the upper 60s, we were below freezing last night. So it's going to take time for these areas just to recover. There's a good chance you're not going to have permanent damage on those areas, but it will take time to have those recover.
That yellowing turf more than likely will come back. It probably didn't crush the crown. I would just aerate those areas and pop them hard with some seed just to give them a chance to come back. Same way with any low indentations. Just aerate, and throw some tall fescue seed or some perennial rye seed down there and let it grow through it.
Would compaction be an issue? Like when, sometimes maintenance drives their truck over a field when they're not supposed to, and you get
Yeah,
the tire treads?
that's why we want to aerate. So it's same way with wet soils, right? They go out there too early and they insist on playing on wet fields. You know, they're doing more damage than they are good. Um, as a field manager, shutting that field down and not letting them on it is by far the easiest way to do it. You get eggs thrown at you. Well, not eggs anymore because they're too expensive, but they throw tomatoes at you. Um, but um, um, but that's okay. There are fields where we need to be in control of those schedules, and we need to be able to say yes. Now they're open, um, even if they're public fields. Um, I know that's easier for me to sit here and say than it is for you to do, but that's your greatest way of like these wet soils. Not only are you compacting, you're also ruining the soil structure. You're getting segregation of the soil particles when you're letting them play on wet fields. So the three particles that make up soil are sand, silt, and clay. This is a soils like 101 um, easier than 101, right? There's sand, silt, and clay that makes up the soil. And when they're wet and we play on them, those get separated and you get layering of the different soil particles. So just, the only way to reincorporate them is to aerate, 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 and that's pulling cores. Um, and spring is not the time to do that if we can avoid it. So.
And like Jeff said too, if they are wet areas and they've rutted these areas, what I would try to do is maybe even roll them out first. Just if it's a deep indentation, maybe get a roller out there and then aerate it heavy. I mean, obviously you're causing more compaction by rolling it, but you're trying to level it out a little bit and then come through and aerate to relieve some of the compaction you just caused. Would be a good step to take.
And Jeff, someone who's, go ahead.
One thing I talk about, I just had a meeting with a group about this was, their right field area where baseball players come out and they all play catch in the same spot and it's soaked and they do all the damage. Obviously, right now the grass can't repair itself. The grass is not actively growing, so it can't repair itself from damage they cause now, which is going to impact their entire year. So what I recommend is taking a blue can of spray paint or a red can of spray paint, whatever you had, and we did the same thing at this field. Is we just painted a dashed blue line about 10 yards in from the edge where they all come out and play catch. They've already ruined it. So about 10 yards in, we made a dashed light blue line so that they know when they come out this week, they have to go to that blue line to throw. Nobody can throw on this side of the blue line. And then next week, I recommend moving the line. That way it spreads out the wear. Try to make them a little cognizant of what they're doing. Because you have to understand, I didn't always realize this when I was a groundskeeper, but these ball players aren't groundskeepers. They don't know a lot of times what they're doing. They're focused on playing the game. We're focused on fixing the field, and there's a divide there. So the more that we can tell these kids or user groups, if maybe they're not kids, but just tell them, just aware of what they're doing and how it affects us, and sometimes it can really go a long way.
And I caught what you were. Thank you, Matt. Jeff, you mentioned something about not aerating in the spring. Is that just core aeration or all aeration?
No, yeah, so core aeration in the spring um, is a double-edged sword. Um, on rectangle sports, so football and soccer, it's really the only time we have a window that we can do that because in the fall, when we like to do it, we're using those fields. And I know soccer they use it all year round, so that's just goes without saying. But what we're doing in the spring when we're core aerifying is we're making a perfect seed bed for weeds and annual grasses as well. So I prefer to core aerate, right? I prefer to recommend core aerification in the fall, followed by planting, and then spring, use it for weed control, whether it's annual grasses or broadleaf weeds, to get them out in the spring. But I understand that there's also sometimes you don't have an option, because you're using that field clear into middle of middle of December when it's too late to be seeding or aerifying.
Mhm.
Yeah, and I think like Jeff said, it is a double-edged sword on these rectangle sports. Spring is the time to do it, is to do all your work. So, I think the one key point is just to avoid doing pre-emergent herbicides
Yeah.
on especially rectangle sports. On baseball and softball, you want to get those ready in the fall. So if you have those fields ready to go in the fall before spring, I still don't like it. But if you choose to do that, baseball, softball, it's possible. Because to me, you're always trying to keep area like the outfield spots thick. Your foul territory where they're always playing catch, and it's tough to seed once you put a pre-emergent down. And what I run into a lot is, a lot of municipalities and schools use lawn care companies to do all their applications. And I say if that's the case, make sure you're involved and know exactly what they're putting out so you're not wasting seed if a pre-emergent is applied. So it's really up to you if you decide to do a pre-emergent or just come after things like Jeff said with a post-emergent herbicide. Because I get calls all the time saying my seed's not coming up, and find out that somebody did put down a pre-emergent. So just know it.
And I'm laughing because Matt's a seed salesman. He sells seed for a living, so he's kind of cutting into his own profits there.
But I've
But
also been a
they're not
groundskeeper
going to
my
come
whole
up.
life, so so it's just being practical that with athletes out there, even if you can't aerate, putting seed out and let them cleaning it in is a good idea. So it's always a good. You have to decide what's best for your situation. If a pre-emergent is best, or just taking care of things post-emergently is whichever one's the best.
So what I'm hearing here is spring is the time to prepare for your rectangle sports, and fall is the time to prepare your ball fields. And
Absolutely.
as far as the spring goes with the ball fields, is there a better time to start your spring for? If you had the luxury of determining when you would allow people on your fields, when would that be? Besides never.
I don't think anybody has the luxury of deciding. I think schedules dictate that. And I mean, these people try to play baseball games on March 4th in Northeast Ohio. And I got text messages from a coach saying they want on February 3rd when I was flying to the golf show. Hey, it's supposed to be a great week. Any chance we can get out there? I'm like, so there's really no way that we can dictate that. It's more based on schedules and people always trying to be out on these fields. And that's where synthetic turf is gaining ground, because everybody wants to be out there in January on the first nice day they have, and it's a challenge for sure.
All right. So somebody asked advantages, disadvantages, pros and cons of planting seed versus putting down sod. You guys want to tackle that one?
Yeah, I can address that. So basically, buying sod, you're buying um, the work of somebody else that has done the work for 18 months. Basically, when you buy a slab of sod and put it down, it's already between 14 and 18 months old. So that grass is already has some maturity, already has some rigidity, has some durability to it. You plant grass seed, you're getting a brand new tender baby, right? So um, whether it's a day old or whether it's 18 months old, it's a living, breathing creature, and obviously at 1 day old, it's a lot more tender and needs to be given an opportunity to grow. So I always now that's a little different with an overseeding situation, a lot different with overseeding because we already have some plants established. But in a new field or redoing an area, goal mouths, that kind of stuff, If gold mouths are completely shot, um, um, I take a sod cutter and cut them out and level out the topsoil, aerate it a little bit, scratch it up, make it so that the roots will get into it, and I'd lay down sod. You'd be super impressed with how inexpensive sod is. I think. You're basically looking at between 49 and 69 cents a square foot. Um, and that's a lot easier. You can play on that in, say, 2 to 3 weeks, versus if you seed an area that's worn out, um, and you got to let it sit for a whole year, 6 months to allow that grass seed to germinate and mature, have some maturity to it, some roots that it can recover. If not, you're throwing the baby out with the bathwater all in one fell swoop because, if you start playing on tender grass, it's defeats the purpose.
Mhm. Let's see. Ryan adds a comment in the chat box. Says municipalities have the option of regulating use of fields via park rule and regulations. However, the challenge is enforcement. And I think that hits the. You could say all the things you want, but unless you're there patrolling it every day, you really don't have that much um, say in that when fields get used.
Yeah, unless you can lock them, unless you can lock the gates and keep people out, it's a challenge for sure.
Is that what you do, Ryan?
No, but as I've experienced in my role over here now is we have a very large youth organization that if it was available 365 days a year, they'd use 365, but they're also the first ones to complain about field conditions. Well, it's a circle, right? The more they use it, the worse the conditions are. So and we actually have it in our ordinance. I just don't know if it was really enforced before. So I just send them an email as I'm saying here, reminding them like, hey, April 1st is our date. Please, we all have the same goal and trying to work together with them to get a plan in place because ultimately the better the field is, the better their games are, and the more enjoyment it is for everyone.
Yeah, no doubt.
Where are you located, Ryan?
Upper Macungie Township. So Grange Park here in Bryansville with the South Parkland Youth Association, soccer, field hockey, lacrosse, and you mentioned about the sod or the gold mouse. That's actually one of the areas we're trying to look to address.
And Ryan was also at Allentown, and he was dealing with a lot of park pressures there also.
Yeah, especially with schools with their PIAA start dates. It's always a challenge.
Oh, PIAA is almost insane with what they expect.
I had maybe it's an easier question. Someone's asked the time of day to water turf grass, best product to add to strengthen the soil.
Yeah, I can take that if you don't mind. The theory behind irrigation is to not lengthen the wet period of the grass. Okay, so let's think about that. Talk that through. If the dew rises in the morning and it comes off the grass and the grass is dry, I'm just gonna say at 10 o'clock. Now it may be 9 o'clock, it may be 8 o'clock, whatever that time is. With irrigation, what we want to do is shorten, we don't want to lengthen the period that grass is wet. Okay, because that's when we become more susceptible to disease, make the grass a little weaker. We, have it become more susceptible to insect infestation or funguses or things like that. So we want to do it so that we don't lengthen the length of wet that plant has. Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Um, so that's a long answer to say basically um, at night, when when the grass is already wet is when you should be irrigating it, not in the heat of the day. To just if you do it in the heat of the day, you're raising the humidity of it, and I'm going to talk to Sean here for just a minute, and he's kind of sideways on us, so I'm just going to talk to him individually. Um, um, so just don't lengthen. You don't want to lengthen the wet period on the leaf tissue.
Mhm. So you could probably do it while the dew is on also to add to it.
Yeah, so you can add moisture, but don't what you if you don't want it to be dry later than it
Right.
normally would be.
Mhm. Okay.
And for heaven's sakes, don't if you have irrigation, don't set the irrigation clock at the beginning of the year and leave it go all year long and never change it.
Right. I realized that I didn't give Jeff and Matt their due as experts in the field. So I just wanted to introduce Jeff and Matt real quick to everyone who may. I just assume a lot of people know these folks. But Jeff was the senior extension education of horticulture, specializing in turf management for Penn State. Uh, he's been working there since he was working there since 1988, and he's just recently retired. He earned a BS from Delaware Valley College and an MED from Penn State University. But he's been advising folks on turf for years and years and years. And Matt is a certified sports field manager with the 20 years of experience as a turf management for minor league baseball and more than 10 years selling grass seeds to the sports turf market. So he knows all about his species of turf, field application, and both of these guys do a lot of volunteer work and work with World Series, Little League World Series. So really good people to have here. They're open for questions. I'm continue to read some questions that you guys supplied, but please feel free to step in and ask a question or put it in the chat box so I can relay it to you. I'll go to one of the more interesting questions we got. Can you share an out-of-the-box idea that you tried with surprising success in the context, anything that you've done in turf management that you weren't sure was going to work, and then all of a sudden, either was a product or something that really jumped out at you, really worked well for you?
Wow.
That's an easy one for me. Matt, I'll answer it, and you can think while I'm talking.
Yep, sounds good.
So when I started in this business back in the early 90s, the book said that we were supposed to use bluegrass because it recovered well from wear and tear. It by the nature of the way it grows, it would, if there was a divot mark or a pock mark, that we could fill it in and it would grow back because the rhizomes were right there to grow. And then we for years and years and years we said um, to overseed with perennial ryegrass. And because it germinated quick, it filled in, it greened up, it did all those things that we wanted to do. I mean, perennial ryegrass will germinate in 4 days. Conditions are right, it'll germinate and be up and be 3 inches tall in a week. And it makes a field look good and recovers quick. It kept it green, kept all that. We biggest trouble with perennial ryegrass is gray leaf spot. It's just so susceptible to gray leaf spot. And I just kept preaching it, kept preaching it, kept preaching it. And about 7 or 8 years ago, um, was at a field day where they had started to use tall fescue to overseed instead of perennial ryegrass. And I am now a convert. I now recommend overseeding with tall fescue, turf type tall fescue, not K31, not the ugliest grass ever made by God, K31. But some of these turf type tall fescues there are some incredible species, some incredible wear tolerance. They have deep roots. They look good. They're fine bladed. They take wear and tear. So that's the one thing that because I mean 30 years ago, we were trying to establish Bermuda grass to fill in, and we now we have some Bermuda grasses that do pretty well up north or further north, but yeah, turf type tall fescue is probably the one thing that has been the most successful. That biggest surprise to me over the kind of work that Matt does, not Matt's coworkers do in the seed breeding fields, where they're breeding species and variety, or meeting breeding varieties, not species, but breeding varieties, and they've just come a long way with turf type tall fescue.
No, I agree, Jeff. They sure have. And a knock on those years ago too was they weren't very cold tolerant. Well, now they're certainly a lot more cold tolerant, gaining steam up in Minnesota, areas like that, where even perennial ryegrass dies when it's too cold. So ryegrass has a lot of weaknesses that get exposed. And Bermuda grass is now in Chicago. It's now in Cleveland in the NFL. So Bermuda grass is pushing very far north. And that's thinking outside the box right there, is taking a chance on an NFL field where obviously millions of eyes are on it, and putting Bermuda grass on Lake Erie, which is not easy to grow grass no matter what it is. So that's definitely something to consider. One thing that I did was that when I was the groundskeeper for the Akron Arrows, it was the AA for the Cleveland Indians in Akron, Ohio. If it was going to rain like 2 days out before a homestand started, I would never consider tarping if it looked nice the day before the homestand. And we decided not to tarp, got an inch of rain. And the day before the homestand, the next day I got to the field, there was no water standing. So I thought we were in great shape. So I just broadcast some turfus on top of it and went home that night and got there the next day of the game. And it was one of those mattress effects where you walk in one spot and the area next to you raises. And I was really concerned about it and started nail dragging it, just trying to, like I would typically do, trying to get it to dry out. And I would see the surface dry, but it would not stop acting like a mattress. So I kept doing that throughout the day, tried to roll it. And my assistant was looking at me because as I rolled it, it was like a tidal wave. The entire infield was moving as I was pushing it. And I was in charge of the facility as well, and they power washed the concourse at 8 in the morning, and it was still soaked at 5 in the evening. What happened was the water got so deep in that infield and the dew point was so high that nothing would dry. It just, when your grease stains in your shop start coming to the surface, nothing would dry. So we had to think. We lost that game. We did lose a game because of it. But the next day I took my solid tine aerator out there and I aerated my dirt. And I let it just sit, but poking those holes deep into that profile, it made the difference. So like I said, sometimes you do have to think outside the box and get holes poked very deep on your clay. And I've helped somebody else do it, and it worked in that situation too. So there's, we're usually pretty creative people in this industry. We do whatever it takes to get a job done. That may not always be the best idea because obviously there was turfus and conditioner on top of that field that is now getting pretty deep into your profile, which isn't always the best. But when it comes to getting games in, sometimes you have to think outside the box.
Good answer. I wonder if you could talk a little more about Bermuda grass, because I just read an article in one of the turf magazines saying that because of the changing weather conditions in the Northeast, as we gradually get a little bit warmer, it's becoming much more amendable to different species, different types of Bermuda grass. And are you guys finding that too? Or is that just one article I read?
Well, I think it's a combination of a couple of things. It's not just the weather, the weather patterns changing, but it's also back to variety advancements. The varieties now, by name, Tahoma 31 is much more cold tolerant than any of the other Bermuda species that we've ever seen. So we're able to grow it in State College. We're seeing it in Cleveland. We're seeing it in Chicago, as Matt said earlier. And so it is a little bit of weather, but it's also some dynamic genetics that they're breeding out of Oklahoma State, who is the primary breeder of all these Bermuda grasses that keep popping up.
Yeah, and I agree totally. It's also it's a management situation. It's different. I mean, I've always said for years you can take a northern groundskeeper and send him down south, and he would have success taking care of Bermuda grass. But it's tougher for a Bermuda grass guy to come north and take care of cool season grass. But it's a generalization. There's a lot of guys can do it, but it's different. It's a different animal, so you have to change how you maintain it. And the further north you go, you still have to do that. And I worked for the Browns for 16 years, and it was tough enough to grow Kentucky bluegrass on Lake Erie, and perennial rye. It was tough to keep that grass alive through the end of the season. So this year was their first year with Bermuda grass. Yeah, it went dormant, but they brought it in overseeded with perennial rye. So the ryegrass made it look green, and the dormant Bermuda grass still maintained that safe footing. So it's got its place, and it's doing well. And I think you will see it further north. It takes learning how to maintain it, like with verticutting and different fertilization requirements. And it needs light. It needs a lot of light, a lot more light than other grasses. But it is possible.
And does it have that many advantages that it's worth it to bring it north?
Yeah, that's a good follow-up. It absolutely does. It's much more wear tolerant. It's more like playing on an artificial turf kind of carpet. Just by the nature of the way it grows by stolons, which are the above ground roots. And they just kind of crisscross and make a big thick mat. So it's literally like playing on a carpet. So you don't get the wear. You get wear, but you don't get to the bare spot. You don't get down to the crown. You don't get you don't get contact with the soil, which is where destruction starts to happen. That's where low spots and puddles start to form, right? Is because we have cleats that get in, or shoes that get into the soil, and we displace soil. So on Bermuda, you don't get that deep, or because you can't get through the layer of rhizomes and stolons that are formed. It's just a weed. In the north, it used to be a weed. We didn't like it, and now we have varieties that can tolerate our cold. So we're doing our best to try to keep it alive now.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Daniel says overseeding with rye brings its own issues. There's never a simple solution. I guess you would agree with that, huh?
Yeah, it does, but it's really the only thing week to week. If you want grass during play, it's really a tool. It doesn't mind germinating under traffic, whereas other grasses like bluegrass does not like to grow while it's being walked on or played on, whereas ryegrass will. But it does. I mean, obviously, gray leaf spot, cold tolerance, it does have its weaknesses, but it's also the tool that can give you grass in 4 days. May not make it through the next game, but if you do that weekly, you'll have cover.
We're in Florida, that's why I say that.
Okay, yeah.
We don't get the dormancy too much with the Bermuda.
Definitely a different story.
Yeah,
you're right. I mean, Bermuda grass. I mean, a lot of people now are deciding not to overseed because the Bermuda grass comes out healthier and stronger in the spring without not having that ryegrass hiding it. For sure.
Oh, that's great. We got
I'm sorry. I was kind of speaking more of a northern guy, but you're right.
Yeah, we definitely.
That's why I figured I'd mention Florida. No problem.
Yep. Thank you.
There is definitely a northeast prejudice here, just because that's where many of us are located. But thank you, Daniel. Thanks for that comment.
No, it's good to know we're not just speaking to Pennsylvania and Ohio people, but yeah, Bermuda grass likes, like I said, it likes sunlight, and if it has a lot of ryegrass hiding it, it's shading it from that sunlight, and also the air, water, and nutrients that it needs. So yeah, it's a different animal as an overseed than a permanent grass.
All right, I got another question. I'm going to put two of these together. Someone had concerned about, or one of their issues is overuse by sports groups in wet weather, and I would combine that with, types of field maintenance, what kind of field maintenance and repairs can you do? while that sport is going on and after that sport has, after that field has been done, is done, I guess.
Well, I think while the sport's going on, it's trying to minimize traffic, trying to maintain where they're going. Like I said, but that was my whole idea of putting that blue line. Don't let them warm up or practice in those areas. I mean, to me, in general, one day of practice is worse than 3 or 4 games. So if you have teams that are out there practicing on your areas, the only thing you can really do is try to move them around. Yeah, I'm a seed salesman, but I was also, like I said, I was a groundskeeper, where just dropping grass seed and letting them work it in with their cleats is the only way. Once things warm up, you'll build yourself a seed bank that once soil temperatures climb, you'll have grass seed starting to grow and recover. Because right now, when these fields are wet, they're destroying them now, which is going to impact your entire year. So trying to control where traffic goes the best you can is really all you can try to do. Jeff, anything to add on that?
No, I think that's that answers it well.
But as far as maintaining it after the fact, like Jeff said earlier, just trying to get your aeration, and if you have to resod some areas, you may have to cut areas out and resod. And if you have play coming on in between, you can use sod staples to staple those areas down to still make them safe if you don't have that 2 to 3 week window to wait, like he mentioned. But sodding is an option too, if you really have to, if they really tear an area up, or if they're driving things out to a field and rutted out some grass pretty bad, just trying to repair it that way is a lot of times necessary too.
So can you hear me for one?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, great. So I'm in parks, and this year we're going to try something a little different. Obviously, I'm in Ohio. And so we have experienced, those same, just like you're saying, that situation. It's the practice that is killing us, that soccer practice, lacrosse practice, those same types of things that are just they're run over and over and over again. So this year, in addition to that, we also found out that we had one of our user groups that was not using any space that was assigned. So they just go in, and if no one was using a space, they'd plop down, put their kids in, they call all their parents and say, this is the spot tonight, be here. And so we're actually going to give them green spaces this year, places to practice separate and apart from any of the fields that they have been comfortable using before. We're actually going to paint out rectangles just so that they understand that that's their designated kind of practice for the night spot. So we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, that's great. And I was thinking while you were saying it, if they are practicing on a game field, maybe just roping off, if you're able to move your goals just to a different spot, just to alleviate some of that pressure in a goal mouth. Mm-hmm. And if you're doing fields that have numbers, maybe don't paint the numbers. And the guys get so used to practicing that week, just they get used to, I have to be on the 30-yard line. I'm doing this drill. Well, if you avoid painting it like normal, they have to go somewhere else than they're used to. But
confuse them a little. Confuse them a little.
Right.
Which a lot of times isn't real hard.
But yeah, practice is tough. And Charlie, like I said, trying to keep, I think having other green spaces is a great idea if you're able to do it, just to alleviate pressure on your highest traffic spots.
And then one last thing, I think to the gentleman's point earlier is that kind of goes along with this, is that I do have to remind myself, I get very frustrated. I think we all do, right? Season after season after season, we're making the same statements over and over and over again. Please run your drills outside of the painted lines. Please, all these kinds of things that we ask for. And then I have to remember, I am asking different people. I am telling new ears. They have not heard my spiel before. So it, even though I get tired of saying it, we still gonna say it.
And they may
You know, it's
not
funny,
be.
when I worked my first job in baseball, my first full-time job, you know, a rain situation. It's rained in different communities, but it may not have rained here. Everyone's calling the office. Is the game on tonight? Is the game on tonight? And everyone used to get so frustrated, and they're like starting to almost yell at these people, like, yes, the game is on. And our general manager freaked out on us and said, look, it's the first time that guy probably called. No, you're treating him like he's the same
Correct.
one that's calling over and over again. So yeah, I get that exactly. It's the same thing. You have to remember that not everybody's heard what you're trying to say and what you're trying to learn. It's hard to be patient sometimes with that, but
Yep.
it is a good lesson.
Yeah.
Amy,
You wanna
there are
educate.
leagues that I have done training for, to how to maintain their field. Little league associations primarily in Western Pennsylvania, and some of those little league associations I've gone back to for the last 30 years, every 2 or 3 years. And I have to remind myself, I would, at first I was getting frustrated with, I was just here. But the parents have moved on. They're now in junior league or senior league, or, the kids are playing adult. So I called it job security.
Yeah.
Yeah, you have to remember that you're educating people one at a time. And just because you talk to a group once, tomorrow's going to be a different person or a different group.
I think another interesting thing, and I used to get so frustrated because, I have 2 kids, but I used to say my baseball field was my 3rd kid. I mean, it took more time. I got to see my field more than my kids, and it was my field. And then I read an article from Ross Kirkab, who used to be with the Denver Broncos, just in Sports Field Management magazine, just saying that it's not your field. I mean, we work for whatever group we work for. We put so much time and have so much pride in it. But once you realize that it's not your field, and like Jeff said earlier, it's job security. But once you once you realize that, look, it's not mine, I work for somebody that has this field, it really does kind of change your perspective on people using it and even abusing it. It's not easy to deal with still, but it's, at least you can sleep.
So the other thing is, Matt, and I would say this to people all the time. And my son worked for 5 seasons with the Kansas City Royals, and I would, he had a particular player who was an 8-time Gold Glover who insisted on warming up on the not on the warning track, but in the grass. And there were 2 footprints right there by the end of the season that were, pretty well worn. And I said something to him about it. And he said, Dad, why? That's why I do it. That's why we do this, for them to play on. Would I prefer that Alex Gordon not warm up on the grass? Yes, but I'm not going to tell the $32 million left fielder that he can't do that. So really, I have to just remind myself, why do I do what I do? I do this because I'm trying to make a safe playing surface for these people to play on. And I think sometimes we forget that as field managers, that we're just trying to make a safer place for kids to play, or adults to play, or users to play. And we want them to use it. We don't want them to stay off of it.
And it's the same whether you're with the Kansas City Royals or you're Amy in Ohio or Ryan in Florida. I mean, we're trying to keep fields safe and playable. And that's why we're having these conversations. Yep. But at the end of the day, you'll sleep better knowing that, look, my job is just to let them play, and we'll try to deal with whatever. But that's why Jeff and I both do what we do for the Little League World Series every summer. We just want to have these kids have the safest, good looking but safe playing fields that they've ever played on in their life. And that's everyone's goal, is to make these fields the best they can be.
And I have a follow-up question for the people who not only manage these playing fields, but also maybe just manage park lawns, the lawn outside the buildings, just, around playgrounds and things like that. Those other play areas that are available to people in parks, I will call them lawns instead of, athletic fields. Would your practices differ much, or, you know, what are some things that people can do just to manage their regular lawns and parks?
Yeah, I think it's different. I think you can treat them different, but I think it's a matter of looking at what grass is being used for those areas too. Um, you know, using, like Jeff talked about earlier, like a turf type tall fescue that's going to, it roots deeper. It's going to tolerate the traffic that it gets, but it also could be mowed higher. You know, you can take care of those areas. You can raise the height of cut on them to be able to withstand some of the traffic that you may not be able to do on athletic fields. But I think using the right grass for the right application is also the best thing to do on your lawn areas or your green spaces where they might have like summertime festivals or concerts, things like that, where you can do, you know, different aerations and just different ways to maintain them. But I think having evaluating what grass you have in there and just trying to make sure you have the best suited for that traffic that's going to be different, is the way to go.
Okay. Thank you. Let's see. Tony in the chat mentions the wear index becomes a factor. They had great success rotating fields and closing areas with signage to balance practice in games. So Tony's got something figured out anyway.
Yeah, I agree. If you have the ability to do that, it's, you know, that's great.
So I want to reverse the wet weather. Somebody asked, how do you bring turf fields back from drought and grubs? Yeah. That was the pretty direct question there.
It's a pretty direct answer. So obviously, bringing it out of severe drought, and here in Western Pennsylvania, and I apologize to those of you that aren't in Pennsylvania, but Western Pennsylvania is dry, but we're not even an eighth of what you folks have down in the eastern side of the state and down in the southeast corner specifically. I mean, the grass there is straw brown and has been since, you know, last July, because it was so dry. Obviously, moisture helps bring that grass back. Aerification, timely aerification that allows those roots um, to reestablish themselves. Fertilization helps for them to come back. Grub damage, depending on how bad that damage is, if it's to the point that it's bare and skunks or raccoons got in there and dug it up and tore it up, the only way to redo that is to seed it or sod it. Unfortunately, because it's not going to come back by itself because it destroys the crown of the plant. But yeah, water, fertilizer, aerification, um, keeping play off of it, so that we don't continue to damage the plant. Is those are the big key factors to think about when recovering from severe drought.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I think this year in Ohio State posted something where from May till August 1st, it was the driest season on record. Or, I mean, at least going back to like 1908 or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, I think, you know, you have different issues with that also. You have a lot of weeds that start to encroach when you have drought periods. So you want to be careful still just to get through the drought before you try to do anything. You don't want to put, you know, excess fertilizer out there through a drought. You don't even want to think about going out there with a herbicide to start taking care of your weeds during a drought, because you're really going to damage all of it. So just being patient really during these periods, which is tough, but just being patient until you have ample moisture to return to get through it is my suggestion. I think we had that conversation last year when we talked about managing summer stress.
Mhm.
Patience
I think
is
we
hard
did.
sometimes. Yeah.
Actually, that brings me to another person was interested in annual maintenance plans, best practices on what to do when. Is there anywhere somebody get more info on that?
Yeah. Keystone Athletic Field Managers Organization, CAFMO, better known as CAFMO, has a calendar of the the time of the year to do turf practices. It was actually adapted and adopted from some work that was done earlier, many years ago at Penn State, but it basically tells you when to aerify, when to top dress, when to overseed, when to soil test, when to apply this, when to do that, when to do that, this and that. Easiest thing to look for, you can look at cafmo.org. It would appear on there, or you can Google or you can search it. Just do turf grass calendar, Penn State Extension. And it would bring up. It's basically a bar chart that tells you that across the top is January through December, and down up and down the left-hand column is different practices and tells you when it's appropriate to do those practices.
All right, I'll see if I can find it and send it out to folks with the recording link.
I can send you the link to it, Dan.
Oh, that'd be great, Jeff. I'd like to see that. There was a question. This is a good one. What is your most treasured or favorite piece of equipment and why? And rent or own, doesn't matter.
Go ahead, Jeff. You can take that one first.
Yeah. So, I'm going to make the assumption that we have adequate mowing equipment, because that would be number one, is to be able to mow our grass in a consistent manner. So that would be number one. That would be my number one. So I'm going to assume that we have mowing capacity to mow the grass at least twice a week, because especially on our athletic fields, because we've done lots of research that says the simple, easiest way to improve quality of grass on an athletic field is to mow it one additional time a week. Okay, so if you're mowing once, mow it twice. If you're mowing twice, mow it 3 times. On an athletic field situation, and the quality of turf goes up exponentially based on that. So we're going to assume that you have the ability to mow. My favorite piece of equipment, without a doubt, is the air fryer. Doesn't matter what form it is. If I only had the ability to buy one piece of equipment, it would be a core air fryer that I could air fry when I wanted, not have to rely on somebody else's equipment to do it, and do it in a timely fashion and do it quickly, because sometimes the window isn't a very big window that we do it, so it needs to be an adequate air fryer to be able to do large areas. In many of your instances, we're talking about multiple fields, multiple, acres of space that we need to be able to aerify quickly. Now, I'm going to say this: aerification with one of those tumblers behind your tractor that just rotates and makes holes every 8 inches. That's not aerification. That's tickling. If you're going to use that kind of an aerifier, you need to go over that field 6-7 times. That's an aerification. Not just going over it one time and calling it aerification. Sorry, Judy, I know that made you laugh, but
Well, you
Go ahead,
took the
Matt.
mower and the aerator. I know it. I'm realizing in this situation too, because we did not have a utility vehicle here for a while,
Okay.
and I didn't have my groomer back yet from the service guys. So, any kind of utility vehicles that you can take things down to a field, you can move things, you can pull a screen drag with a utility vehicle if that's all you have. You can pull an aerator with a utility vehicle if that's all you have. I mean, you can manipulate it to build something on the back of it to carry every tool at one time. So, I mean, yeah, I agree that mowing is number one. Aeration, you can't poke enough holes in a field, and to really, you can't. I mean, we spend all year trying to make it beautiful, but we need to rip it up a couple times a year to keep it healthy as well. But I would have to say, aside from those two pieces, a utility vehicle can do anything that you need it to do.
And Jeff, just to follow up on aeration, you said your window might be short at times. Can you talk a little bit more about when's the right time to aerify and, what kind of conditions you need?
Well, so you don't want to do, you can't aerify in the extremes, right? You can't aerify properly when it's extremely dry, because you don't get good penetration. You don't get good compaction relief. You're not pulling any, and I'm talking about core aerification, right? So we're not pulling a good core. If we do it when it's too wet, um, we're doing is making a mess because we're making it worse because we're glazing over the edges of the hole when we pull. If it's muddy and we go out and core aerify and we pull that core, we're actually glazing the sides of that with the particles and basically making a bunch of little ponds, little pores, that don't accept water because they're glazed over on the inside. So the window is, you know, in some cases is very small. Sometimes, it's perfect for a long time depending on rainfall. But we don't want to do it when we can't do it when it's too dry because we don't get any penetration. Don't want to do it when it's too wet because we get that glaze over. Now, that's core aerification. There's lots of other ways to aerify, and some of those work better when it's dry. Um, an aerator, the machine that we can pull behind the tractor and it kind of turns, at the same time that it's going forward, kind of has a rotation to it in the head. Those are wonderful when the soil's dry because we get good compaction relief. Um, but a core air fryer in too dry, we can't do it.
Let's see. Ryan also has chimed in. Has anyone heard of hybrid natural grass artificial turf products? If so, is that an emerging trend or is it a wait and see type of option right now? Good question, Ryan.
I had a sales pitch from a company about a product, and I'm just curious. Not a long track record of an established company, so I'm just curious.
I've
I
had
need,
I've had some friends that have dug up like an area in front of third base where the third baseman constantly walks in and destroys that grass. So he put down some synthetic turf, buried it down pretty far, but enough that those fibers would still stick up over the worn out spot. And limited success. I didn't really see anything in that. I mean, obviously, some of the NFL fields have stitched like fibers inside the field that help hold it in place, but I don't know how widespread that really is or is ever going to be in a park setting or schools, things like that. Jeff, are you seeing
yeah.
some more of
So
that?
so Ryan, to get a little bit more specific about it, in 2026, there's this little thing coming to the United States and Canada, North America, called the World Cup. And all of the World Cup games are going to be played on natural grass, and all of those natural grass fields are going to be grown on what's called a hybrid field. So basically, they have put down a synthetic carpet. They've top dressed, sand over top of it, and they've planted grass seed right into it. So um, all of those fields are going to be what they call reinforced or hybrid fields, that they're playing on. Um, I think that there probably is some place for it. One of the disadvantages to it, and why many people abandoned it back, 15, 20 years ago, when a lot of the now NFL fields like Pittsburgh, Philly, Denver, Green Bay, they all had hybrid fields. They had stitched with a DD Turf Master, and they've abandoned those because, they couldn't sod. They couldn't sod into the worn out area in the middle. So they abandoned those, and when the last time they ripped them up, or two times ago when they ripped them up, they abandoned that thing. A little bit different than the hybrid that you've probably been approached about currently. Um, that stuff it's I think, Matt, that may be a little bit more like we saw when we were in Milwaukee when they were stitching in, a little bit tighter pattern than the old DD Turf Master. Um, where when the grass does wear out, there's still enough green there to keep that area stable. I think it has a place in the situation. that you guys might be in, you guys and ladies may be in, where we're in a Parks and Rec situation where um, um, we can't do a whole lot because it's getting used every single day. And we're our hands are kind of tied with that, especially in the heavy wear areas. I wouldn't do a whole field in it by any stretch of the imagination, but let's just use a baseball field for an example. As Matt said, where the third baseman plays up, or the first baseman plays up, or the area right in front of the pitcher's mound might be a beneficial area. But remember that you can't aerify that once you've put that down. You can't core aerify it, I should say. You can put solid tines into it, but you can't pull cores on it.
Yeah.
So it would have limited use and um limited effectiveness, I think would be the right word in our situation.
Sounds like it's a wait and see type of
Well,
deal.
I mean,
I mean, we'll
or
see,
give
like
it
Jeff
or
talked about.
or give it a try.
Yeah.
Do it in a wear area and in front of the pitcher's mound. Put some of it down and see what it does. I can tell you that it's expensive as all get out. My son's on a sod farm and he's growing 3 fields of it for World Cup. And they're paying silly amounts of money for it. So my theory is for the average Joe, we can resod it a number of times to get to the price that they're going to pay for hybrid sod. And you can't just
And the
cut
whole
that with a sod cutter. You have to cut it with like a brick saw. Like to cut it off. You can't just take a knife and cut it like you can side. You got to have a gas powered like concrete saw to cut it.
Jeez.
Yeah, it's
Tough stuff. All right. I got one last question. I don't know who submitted this, but I think it's interesting. Aside from the win-loss total for the Pirates in 2025, have there been any major playing field changes you are aware of?
Just in Pittsburgh?
I don't know. I didn't write the question, so I assumed you knew this person or whatever.
No, I mean, if it is Pittsburgh, just talking to Matt with the Pirates, I think just the thing that he's doing more and more of is using grow lights, which is another thing that'll be expressed a lot more in FIFA with the World Cup. But using grow lights in right field where he sees very little sunshine all winter long. A lot of places are doing that now. So that's something he's getting more and more involved with as the length of his sun decreases. So that's one little different piece that he has that I would say for 25. I don't know that their win-loss total is going to change very much.
All right. I'm mindful of the time, and I see we're just a couple of minutes over. So what we'll do is we'll call an end to this. I'm going to share my screen real quick. There you go. I want to give Jeff and Matt a big thank you for your answers to today's questions and being here with us for this event. I put their email addresses there if you guys want to contact them later for maybe talk to Matt a little more about his seeds and what he's got going. And Jeff is always available to help out with specific questions. My name again is Dan Hendy. I'm with the Maintenance Institute. If you're interested in the Maintenance Institute, it's www.themaintenanceinstitute.com. You can find out more about our website and what we do, or you can email me at danh@prps.org. Otherwise, a big thank you. We could stay on a little bit more if you have other questions for Jeff or
I'm just
Yeah,
posting.
if not, like I said, I'm available anytime.
I apologize. I just posted the link to that calendar, Dan, that we had talked about.
Oh, great. Yeah, I see it.
Thank you all.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, I am gonna download that. And I'm gonna go ahead and stop my share. I'm gonna end this recording.